All right, here we go. Question 35 from our Calculus 1 homework number 1. In WebAssign, they want us to evaluate the limit if it exists. And if it doesn't exist, we're going to enter D and E. We have the limit as x approaches 0 of x squared times cosine of 5 over x. I see a couple of ways to approach this. I know if you click the Watch It button, they illustrate how to solve this with the squeeze theorem. I'm going to offer two alternate approaches, one of them being graphing and the other one being a property of limits. So here we go. If we go to Desmos and graph the cosine of 5 over x function by itself, we can see that as you approach 0, this graph gets almost solid so that you can't really tell whether it's going to be 0, 1, -1, or something in between. So by itself, the limit of this function is going to be does not exist, since you can't tell exactly what it's approaching. And if you zoom in on this graph, you're going to see the closer you zoom into 0, the more solid it gets. So that's not going to have a limit as we approach 0. But if we turn on the graph of the actual function we're looking at the limit of, you can see that multiplying by x squared dampens the wave as you come into 0. So the y values are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, even though they're bouncing back and forth between negative and positive values. They are approaching a height of 0. So I'll turn this off so you can see that better and zoom in some, that as you get closer and closer to 0, this function's height approaches 0. So we can see graphically that this limit should be 0. And now let's take a look at the property of limits that will help us figure this out. So in my scratch work, I've got my function copied down here, f of x equals x squared, and I'm going to make sure you understand that that is multiplied by cosine of 5 over x. One of the properties of limit says if you're looking at the limit of a function that is the product of two separate functions, what you can do is you can separate that and say the limit as x approaches 0 of x squared times the limit as x approaches 0 of your other function, cosine of 5 over x. Remember, this function by itself does not exist based on the graph we looked at, because the values as you approach 0, they just bounce back and forth between -1 and 1. So this part, we don't really know what the limit is. However, this limit, we do know what it is. Since it's polynomial, we can do direct substitution to calculate the limit. And if I plug in a 0, I get a 0. So the limit of x squared as x approaches 0 is 0. Remember that this is multiplied by this other limit. So it doesn't really matter what it is. Anything times 0 is 0. And so that's another way that we can see that this limit should be 0. So now all we need to do is go back to our WebAssign, input the 0, and submit to see how we did. And it looks like I didn't teach you the wrong stuff. So that's going to do it for this particular problem. If you have any questions or comments about anything covered in this video, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below, or you can text me, and thanks for watching.